continue. First thing, here on the mirror board, we have a circle where we put each other's name down, so we know who worked on the this process today. You can, if you're not on a mirror board and you rather watch, I can put your name down. And yeah, so today in this session, we have one decision to make. Do we want to create a mini proposal, improve existing mini proposal, or actually improve the process of mini proposal? And the question, what is mini proposal? It's a process made collectively made by different people who have put their who wanted to put the proposal on Ideascale and do it in a methodical way. And this has created kind of like a process where you have a question and you answer it, and then you and through this question answering stage, you end up with all of the different aspects. So if I open up one of the examples of how the process would look like, there is like several chapters. We can do it in any order, but right now, but we will just start from left to right. Like we brainstorm a problem statement, then describe a solution, then create a title for that, give us roles to that to the problem, have put down a checklist, expectation and checklist, define a market, define a success, add some KPIs, use a flowchart. So it has several chapters. Oh, okay, almost finished. Product and budget, and then finally summarizing budget. So this is all for the co-creation and brainstorming, all the required information for the proposal. It does not provide a document on the Ideascale. So in the end, you would have to copy paste the blue boxes into paper and formulate it into nicer text, but it gives the depth of for the proposal itself. Any questions so far? Vincent, Peter, George? Nope. All right. Vincent, Peter, and George. I'm gonna write your name down here. First,
my computer's really straining. I think running Zoom and the mirror board at the same time, or I think it's just a lot of graphics loaded on that mirror board. It's my first time loading it.
If you first time loading it, it might be the fact that it's just loading it all up. But if you have had it open for a while now, then I guess it's training. I have all the time the screen share open, and I will be taking notes if you say something, so it's okay. And like first, is anybody here who wants to improve other existing mini proposals? Just then, because that would be an experiment where we take somebody else's problem statements and just continue it. So that would be another experiment where we try to collectively improve somebody else's problem statements and solutions. And for now, we would have 4 examples here for problem statements, actually 5. There is a disconnect between potential collaborators and opportunities between project catalysts. Hard to know who to trust and what information to trust. Other holders cannot leverage their ADA the way they can leverage traditional financial assets. Or finally, the adoption rate of transaction is slow. So if any of these problem statements kind of it is something I would want to discover, we could also hop into that. However, if none of them were like, I don't know, or you have your own problem you want or would like to hone into, then of course we couldn't make a new process, get the new process started.
I don't mind either way, but I'm a proposer, so I could be very easily selfish and ask to help on my problem statement. But I'm good either way, whatever everybody else wants to do.
How about you, Peter?
Do you have any?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm gonna put a proposal in as well, but I haven't drafted it yet, so I'm more than happy to have a go and see what Vincent started with, and that would be helpful to me, rather than just creating a fake one. I think it's worthwhile to use a real one.
Mm-hmm.
George, do you have any preferences, George? I mean, I think a new proposal, maybe based on something real, would be good, particularly as we're entering. People are submitting proposals tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it'd be a good time to do a new proposal.
All right. Sure. Sorry for not hearing you through, but we will be then brainstorming and honing into Vincent's problem. So Vincent, could you tell what was the starting problem or problem you see?
Yeah, I rewrote it this morning. I can put it in the box. Ooh, it's very long.
Okay, very nice. Today's DAO are not transparent. A voter cannot trust presentations. A voter cannot trust presentations are accurate. Auditors cannot validate architecture. I think the sentence is kind of unreadable, but I get the idea.
Yes, when you read it, it's like, this is way too wordy. I like the problem statements below. They're much simpler, but they make more sense.
Not bad, in my opinion. I think I get the gist of what you're saying, just as a first take.
A voter cannot trust presentations are accurate.
That part I'm not sure what you mean. Like let's say just like the white paper of what the DAO is supposed to be. Like that's the presentation. Like this is what our DAO is going to do. That's what you mean by presentation.
Yeah. I think that might actually be really good. You just cannot trust white papers would probably be a good one. And it's not that like the white papers are bad. It's just that you don't know how it's implemented. There's no connection between the white paper and the actual implementation where you can see how that was actually done. Unless you like go into the code and go line by line, right? Which no one's going to do. Not for free anyway. That's like it's a pretty expensive service.
There's like a huge like variance in quality of white papers too, isn't there? Like there used to be a bit of a standard like in the early days, right? Like the Bitcoin white paper, Ethereum white paper, and early projects, and then it became kind of a marketing tool in my opinion, right? And and also very divorced from technical implementation. Like the white paper was like, this is how we're going to do it. Like this is the algorithms, this is the architecture. And these days it's more like it's a marketing tool. Like it might as well be a brochure. That's my like, so that's just maybe you're touching on the same issue. Maybe I'm not sure, but
yeah, no, totally. Like you're speaking the language that I want to get out there. It's that people there's no standards that you can trust really, right? Like. And I think that's a problem for DAOs, especially if we want them to become really adopted, is that we need to have standards. We need to start thinking about DAO standards that people can trust.
It's funny you say that because my proposal, I'm working on an Oracle spec, and because I think oracles are going to be critical to supporting smart contracts on Cardano, and there's a wealth of existing technical standards that could be applied to the information provenance chain that isn't there and I'm basically had the same problem. Like, how do I trust that the information coming through Oracle is trustworthy? Yeah. And there's some industry, again, some white papers that people have written, but they're ignoring existing technical standards that should be applied, in my opinion. And that's going to be kind of the gist of my proposal. But so yeah, lack of standards.
Yeah.
Or like, do you think there are standards that just aren't like, so I guess that maybe to flip it around and like say what I'm saying, like my take is that there are standards that just not being applied to like Oracle architecture. And like, do you think there are white paper standards or like DAO proposal standards that already exist that should be applied, or just there isn't one and you're proposing to create one?
Well, I think I think you could make a formally verified DAO, right? Like you could. It's not that you can't, but it's that it's too. There's no framework that would allow a regular developer to interact with that. Like there is formally verified software development. There are standards for that. There's entire like there's a lot on that. I don't think that you could rely on people actually doing it though. And even then, you don't necessarily get what you expect, because the actual implementation and compilation and the system architecture and stuff like that can, you know what I'm saying? So yes, I think there are standards in that space, because what I'm really trying to do is create a formally verifiable software architecture that people can use. It's very restrictive, but it's easier to interface with than say trying to do something in Haskell.
So maybe the words formally verifiable should be in that problem statement. Like there are no formally verifiable DAO standards currently, or right? Sorry, it's just
yeah, no, that's totally true. There's no formally verifiable DAO. Period. Like there are no. And
that's your problem statement.
A DAO's formal structure. I think that's good. That's good.
Okay, so we have now, there is, okay, let's use both. There are two sentences here. One is that today's DAOs are not transparent. A voter cannot trust presentations are accurate. I'm still not quite sure how that works. Maybe I'm just, my English is so bad that I don't know what it means.
I think we can probably delete the third one. Auditors can't validate structure, because it's really anybody can't validate the DAO.
Okay.
I'll leave it. But and then the voter cannot trust presentations are accurate is, I think the too much marketing speak on white papers is a good way to put it.
Can we say if voter cannot trust presentation if these are accurate? So it.
I made a mistake. Oh man, no. How about a voter cannot trust developers? Period. I didn't want to say that because it sounds like really bad.
Okay. That's right.
Maybe if you say currently, then it's just like suggesting that it's something that's like it's currently cannot. So it's something you're proposing to change. That doesn't sound so bad when you say it that way. In my opinion.
That sounds way better. then you can never trust developers.
Yeah, and technically, the point here is not to really go too deep and to the wording, because the yellow parts of the process is actually just brainstorming. Okay. And I took one like a snapshot of the ideation. Now the question is, we want to go to the root cause of the problem, and that's what there is a good solution of using why question. So why is the selected problem a problem? And if you try to change it now, why is it the problem that DAOs are not transparent? And you actually did 2 points here. So why is it the problem that the voters cannot trust developers? They might be obvious, but but the answer might be insightful in a sense if you change it into problem statement.
Why is the selected problem a problem? That's a good question. Why is it a problem that DAOs aren't transparent? I mean, it's not necessarily if the DAO always behaves correctly, right? But
sorry, I was just not clear. I thought, did we not decide on the verification side? Because is it an issue of transparency or verification?
Yeah, I think let's try to address all of these. this one what was first pointed out, and then also use that one to like.
Otherwise, we could go down a quite wide path here, because there's a big difference between. I mean, a lot of DAOs are transparent; they're just not formally verified. You know, there are open source DAOs which are just not well built.
Okay. I guess when I think transparent might be the wrong word, because when I say transparent, I mean understandable by the people that are actually going to be using the product, right? So transparency for me has a meaning where it's whether or not the code is there, whether or not you can, you could write it all in Latin and say it's right in front of you, and then no one can read it, right? You can build a system that nobody understands, and that's not transparent, right? So transparency to me is, and maybe I just need a new word. Maybe we just need a new word for that. It's
yeah. Sorry, I didn't
understand their DAO.
Maybe we can bracket it. Maybe we can bracket it and move on. But it just occurred to me that.
Yeah, I'll just give you my reason why I don't understand DAOs is because like the white papers are like 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 pages, and it's just so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And it goes into so much detail, and which, again, this is the paradox, I guess. You kind of have to make it formally verifiable if it is actually legit DAO. But part of the reason is just like it's too much information, and it's like, how does this compare to the last DAO proposal I read? And it's always like, you kind of come at it with like a sense of mistrust. You're like, what's the angle? Like, really, how big is the pre-mine? Like, what's going on here, really? Like, you know what I mean? It's almost like you're coming at it cynical these days. It's like, which is sad in a way, right? Because, but, and then of course, the whole technical side is like, I was one of the victims of the first DAO hack as well. And so like, okay, like, is it technically sound? Is it secure? And that requires all those pages of technical detail that I'm not qualified to understand myself necessarily. That I'm not that good of an engineer, but so that's just my take on that question.
Yeah, and I think formal verification is a very high bar. I'm not entirely sure that the framework that we build will be able to do it, but it will. The guarantee is that anybody can simulate it on machine, right? So I would say that's, you can't simulate the DAO on your machine, and that's a problem. It's not necessarily that it's formally verifiable, because if you formally verify that the system can screw you, that doesn't help you at all. And it doesn't mean that you know that. Like you could be staring at an equation that says, yes, this works as it's intended, but if it's intended to screw you, you may not know that, right? So more important, and this goes back to the transparency things, that you understand how it works. Voters do not understand how their DAOs work. And that's a problem. Developers.
That's a good problem statement.
Maybe that is, that could be, voters don't understand how their DAOs work.
Is it about demonstration, Vince? Because the problem statement, I mean, there is no way to demonstrate a DAO works.
Yeah, there is no way to demonstrate the DAO works as constructed. That's also a problem. So not only do people not understand it, they don't know if it'll even work, or if there has to be some jank hacks to make it work kind of as proposed.
You can't even really test net it, can you? Because when you're talking, I was thinking, well, I guess I could spin up the DAO smart contract on a test net, but then how do you simulate individuals participating and voting and having opinions? Like, it's a really difficult question. Maybe it's an impossible question. I don't know.
It's not an impossible question. It just means that the network wasn't constructed in a way that you can simulate, right? So there's no there's no framework that lets you clone the whole DAO and click like DG run, and then all of a sudden all the interfaces are open and you can actually see here's all the inputs, etc. With parameters. You don't get a little parameter sheet, little YAML file that says how many people do you want to participate in this step or something like that to see. You know what I'm saying? Like the DAO, any DAO should be able to tell you, what are my inputs? What are my starting parameters? What do I need to evolve? And then as it steps, as the DAO steps through it, you should be able to, it should be able to tell you, okay, interface is open. I'm now collecting information from this Oracle, which uses this interface, which exposes this API. So you can push information here. This Oracle is now closed. You know, you should be able to see that. It shouldn't be hidden. You should be able to just clone the DAO, and it runs a simulation layer that may not be as deployed, but at least will act as it should be deployed. And then you can, ideally, we should be able to deploy it too, but that's like getting, I don't want to get into details, but yeah, a voter should be able to understand the DAO and simulate the DAO's behavior, and they can't. You can't do that with any DAO.
Well, can we take a short? What is more important is it for the vote? Sorry, is it for the general user to simulate the DAO, to be able to do that, okay, or to understand it? Because the understanding becomes like downstream, yeah. Because isn't the essential thing to simulate it? If it's not simulated,
I think yes.
You can't simulate it; it doesn't work.
Yes, no, it's true, right? Yeah, understanding something that
yeah.
doesn't simulate is moot, right? Because now you understand nothing. You understand a fake. You know, you understand that car doesn't run. Like, great.
Yeah.
You're
so
right. I think that's probably the source of the problem is that you're right. You're right. DAOs understanding will come from simulation, from being able to run the DAO through hundreds of iterations or thousands or millions of iterations with lots of different initial conditions, and lots of different feeds. You can understand the DAO in a way that I don't think people can, but also equally important is the people that can't simulate it, that they have a representation that they can understand that represents the code, and that's the visual aspect, right? So there are people that are voting on it that won't even understand the simulations, right? So if you simulate 1 million voters, they just can't process that. They're not thinking that way.
So are we moving towards it? So are we moving towards selecting that as a problem? But then why is that a problem? The problem I'm not going to, let's say, not being able to simulate a DAO is a problem, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that a problem?
Okay.
Because you can't understand it. And you can't be sure that, yeah, one, you can't have good understanding. So the community cannot have good understanding of its behavior. Auditors cannot have good understanding. And that would include auditors, all the stakeholders, right? So stakeholders, if you can't simulate it, stakeholders cannot understand or trust its behavior.
Is your proposal leading towards like creating a DAO simulator? Like, is that what your solution would be? If I'm sorry, if I'm skipping ahead.
A framework, and it includes the simulator,
right?
In the same language that the framework's written in. So it'd be very similar to like Django having a web server, or how a lot of web frameworks have web servers. This would just have a simulation server that would spin up all the necessary infrastructure for simulation.
Cool. Wow.
And then the visualization side is the graph side, where it'll actually pop a pretty graph of the thing.
That sounds pretty amazing. First of all, Vincent, like that's a really cool project. And
thank you.
That would be hugely beneficial in my opinion. You're getting my votes.
Well, it's funny you bring up like a trusted Oracle. One of the early sensing things that we did is that all the primitives, like, so when you build the graph and you have these abstractions, we want those to be as trusted of a primitive as possible. So like if you say I'm going to use this Marlowe contract, this is a validated Marlowe contract. If you say you're going to use this Oracle, that Oracle is constructed in a way that is best practices, right? So that if you have a deployment target, eventually you want to be able to deploy it, right? So one-click deploy, once you've simulated it and you like it. You want to have like a best practice for deployment target for all the different primitives and connections and servers and stuff that are behind it. So what you're doing is just as important. So it's almost as like when we have an Oracle primitive, we want that primitive to be built in a way that is as great as possible, right? So the primitives, a big part of the early working groups are designing the primitives that will be connected in the graphs. and we want those primitives to be as high quality as possible. So what you're doing, like Oracle is a known primitive in the proof of concept. So like, I'd love to keep talking with you about that, but that's
Cool.
Back to the problem statement.
So we're kind of refining the problem now, where we've the reason sorry, Tevo. Yeah. Go on.
I think, yeah, we did get ahead with one problem statement, but at the beginning I heard that this is even much better thing to go like down path. So if we answer all of these, we will have more examples in the end where we choose, okay, which is the best problem statement for what you are trying to address. So
no, I think the why is it a problem is answered by this last one. The stakeholders cannot understand the functionality or behaviors of a DAO that cannot be simulated. Why is it a problem that
That's something up. Does that answer? Does that refine the problem?
okay.
I think it does. I think it does. And then I think formal verification is a bar that I'm not going to try to hit. It'd be great if the primitives had those, could be formally verified, and we want to try to get there, but I don't know if that's going to be possible in early iterations of the framework.
So that goes back to what we were saying earlier. That understanding comes downstream from simulation. So.
I'm much more of a data person, and Monte Carlo. I'd rather that somebody beat up a server for a day and tell me that a DAO looks good under all these different parameters and all these different circumstances than something be formally verified. Because to me, but I'm a data person, so that's just what I would like to see.
Can you repeat? Why wouldn't you go down this path?
Formal verification is one, a high bar, and two, doesn't guarantee that the system will behave the way you want it to. It just means that the system is verified. So a verified system doesn't verify behavior, it just verifies the bounds of interaction, that things are connected properly. It doesn't actually tell you whether or not a DAO can steal money or there's a siphon in there somewhere or anything like that. So formal verification doesn't give you doesn't really give you trust unless you also simulate. You still have to simulate, right? So even if you have a formally verified system, you still need to simulate it to ensure that the behavior is as you expected and
okay,
and whatnot.
So good. So now we kind of found ourselves in two of the like problem statements, or not problem statements yet, but more root cause. Like one is the general voters cannot simulate DAO was like one problem what came up from the transparency. But if we go to root cause of that, we ended up with the last one, stakeholders cannot understand the functionality or behaviors of DAO. And we would have ended up with that. But if we now answer the discussion that the problem that voter cannot trust developer, then we would end up with this section option as a second option. And usually I do it the why 3 times. So we perhaps could put another spin on this and say, why is it a problem that stakeholders cannot understand the functionality? But then we are going back to this, right? Oh, no.
I mean, the trust aspect, I think I'm trying to remember what I thought referred to. I mean, Vincent, you didn't really want to blame developers, but I mean, to depersonalize that, you can't trust the code base. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So, and you can't trust the code base. Why can't you trust the code base? Because you can't read it. You've got to go off and read a white paper. Why can't you can't read the white paper? Because it's too long. You know. So it comes back full circle to the simulation thing. You know, so you need to understand the code base to understand it in terms of, does this work? You know, you need to run it, you know. And I don't want to recap what you said, but that running has to be some kind of run through of its different behaviors. But for this proposal, you're saying, Vincent, it can't be so excessive. It can't be a complete formal verification of the whole thing. So,
No,
it's going to be a kind of functional test.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
A functional test of the code base, if you like.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah, it is a functional test of the code base.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that if the graph is valid and connected, by running it through, you hit all the edges. Because you have to, if it's connected. Otherwise, you end up with otherwise it just there's some nice properties about testing a system that everything is connected. You don't end up with any orphans or code.
Now you're getting into quite the specifics there in terms of a proposal, say a general person reading the proposal. That's what I'm thinking about. What would they understand? Okay, they would understand the functional test of the code base, but they may not understand these graphs and edges and these nodes don't connect up well, less so, Mm-hmm. So, and you're probably going to explain that in more detail anyway, aren't you?
I'm going to try to do that with pictures. So I'm going to try my best to do that with pictures.
Yeah. So what's the, where are we, Tevo?
We are still trying to figure out, are we going into the loop if we are going to try to get to the last problem statement? Like, why is it the problem that stakeholders cannot understand the functionality or DAO behaviors of a DAO that cannot be simulated? Because we are almost getting into solutions and we are like trying to grasp around. But
what do you want us to do? Do you want us to create more problems here?
Well, right now I would. Right now it would be why is it the problem? Just not the problem, but like just the reason why is the problem. Even more because and if we are going to now capture something in the beginning to get the full loop, then we know that we actually are in a circular case and we have to select something from the selected problem statements we have, which best addresses it. But if we are ending up with something new, then that could be our actual problem statement, which is capturing like the whole of the thing.
Would it be wrong to compress understand the functionality or behaviors to trust? Because is that not trust of a non-human system? Is that you understand its functionality and behavior? Would the statement stakeholders cannot trust a DAO that cannot be simulated be somewhat equivalent and maybe more impactful, or is that going too far and I should stick with and maybe sticking with the explicit the functionality and behaviors?
Well, I suppose it comes down to does trust mean understanding functionality? And I suppose that's a debatable question. I mean, in a way it does, it can do, but it doesn't only mean that, does it? Does trust mean functionality? Trust doesn't mean just expected functionality, or does it? I suppose.
Or does trust mean that you understand how someone's going to behave in a certain situation?
All right, yeah, behavior.
The behavior part's in there too. I mean, all of this would be covered in the detail. I'm just wondering, I don't think that's a lie, but I think, and I'm thinking it might be, I don't know, but I also think that it's very markety, right? So trust is a markety word. that gets thrown around a lot. And I like the idea of having trust be well defined in this scope, which is that we're trusting a piece of software, and we're trusting it because we understand how it functions and how it behaves in a wide range of scenarios. In fact, maybe even all scenarios that it can be faced with.
Yeah, that's right. You want to take your own medicine, don't you? You don't want to be vague.
So what? I work.
Or go on, please.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Stephen. Go ahead.
No.
So I work in the field of like record keeping. I'm an archivist, and so we have very specific definitions of trust, and it pretty much boils down to authenticity and reliability. So is this thing authentic, and is it reliable? And that's kind of what you're talking about as well. Now, yeah, like in the blockchain world, of course, and you know that trust has gotten so many definitions. It's critical. Like trust is critical, and we're like, okay, you know, things are trustless because there's cryptographic proofs, but then, which is great, but that's the foundation that we're building on. But then there's actually these building blocks that do require trust, and that's what you're talking about now. And so am I with the Oracle stuff I'm talking about. And so it's a bit difficult, like trying to get people to understand what you're trying to address, because everybody's like, well, aren't we in a trustless world? Like, isn't this we're dealing with trustlessness, right? So why are you talking to me about trust? So it's a bit difficult to get the message across, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think it's critical. I think it's being overlooked. I think a lot of current Oracle solutions are saying, trust us, we've got this figured out, and here's our white paper. It's the same problem you're describing at the root. And whereas I'm looking at them going, you haven't really solved the Oracle problem at all. Like you're just asking us to trust your architecture now and trust your systems. And even when you're having like, and trust how you've maybe amalgamated multiple, we're using multiple sources, multiple data feeds, but then trust, how can we, again, there's no visibility and provenance on how those data. So again, it's coming. So sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but authenticity and reliability are two key terms we always use in the archiving world to describe what the end result being trust.
So I'm not an archivist, but I have worked with some archivists, and I think that's a fascinating overlap here. Like you have things like an archival description, yeah, and you have the sense of provenance as well, and
Exactly.
an audit trail, and I know you have different schemas in archives and different approaches, doubling core and standards, and then means of verification of the archival object and these are all things, Vincent, that have parallels with, I suppose in theory, you could simulate an archive. Peter, I'm not sure what you think about that. But yeah, so I'm not sure
that's where I'm going with what I'm going to be dealing with the Oracle piece. And it's really interesting to hear somebody else actually understand the archival world, Stephen. That's really encouraging. But I don't think it necessarily helps Vincent. I think it's a slightly different problem that he's talking about with DAOs. It's less like the formal verifiability of a DAO design is what he's addressing. And I still so you have to trust that the architecture is authentic, and it's more about reliability. Like, is the architecture reliable? Can I rely on the information? Can I rely on its outputs? And are the decisions being made by the DAO authentic? Like, how can I know that the DAO vote wasn't corrupted? Like, is that DAO, is the result authentic, right? And it's going to be authentic if if the architecture is reliable, and I can prove that, then I can say that the votes are authentic, and now I can trust the whole thing, right?
Oh, that's interesting, because I actually have downstream, maybe in Fund 7 or Fund 8, depending on how far we get, if we get funded in Fund 6, is automating the deployment and actually offering the deployment of these framework DAOs as a service, so that you just submit your code, you submit the DAO, and then you would have that authenticity, because you would have a CI/CD chain that you could actually pass through all the way through the hybrid on-chain and off-chain, and you could see, we could actually record those on the blockchain, every step of the spin up, every step of the code, which branches were actually deployed, And that could theoretically be auditable by
Yeah,
everybody.
now
As you
you
should
are
say,
talking. Now you are talking archives language. That's exactly it. Audit trails, just like Stephen pointed out, which is and again exactly that. Like to document it and then store that in a reliable way, and then you can prove that that information is authentic. It hasn't been tampered with. And so that now you are talking that is kind of like that archives language. And that's again part of, that's downstream. But again, that's part of the problem I'm seeing is that there's no traceability of how information goes from point A to point B, C, C, D till eventually ends up on an Oracle on chain. And that's to me the huge gap. And that's Stephen did a good job pointing out the key pieces of that. That I think for the archives world that my expertise can be applied to that.
There's another irony here is that I'm putting a proposal on using continuous integration on
I'm there with you.
with distributed audibility. So basically, things like GitHub Actions, that kind of stuff. So so basically to automate auditable solutions. And exactly why Peter is saying, because you take a process, it could be a process like you're doing, Vincent, or it could be a static object like an archival object or something like that, or anything, and then you just submit that to a GitHub Action or something, or whatever platform you're using, and test it. And then you once you've got those tests run through the continuous integration, then you have a means of documenting it. Is that what you're saying, Peter?
Absolutely, yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think Git itself is fantastic technology for this, right? And so what I would like to see is the actual the entire audit trail ending up on the Cardano blockchain, because we've got we got some room in the metadata blocks, right? But then to make it ease of use and make it more usable is to even just publish it to a GitHub repo. And everything we just talked about, right? Like, and then you can verify it against the information of the blockchain. But using GitHub itself just as very common, easy to use tools, I think are a piece of the solution. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Stephen, as well.
Yeah, we're getting a lot into the solution, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I didn't mean to.
No,
we're all doing it.
I think this goes back to simulation. I think this kind of goes back to simulation, Stephen, especially if you're talking about continuous integration running tests, right? So one of the problems with DAOs right now is that they're multi-repo. You've got people doing a web server and a front end and all this other stuff. And then there might be a piece that actually talks to on-chain code, or there might be a faucet or something like that, right? And you can't simulate all of it. You have to spin up 5 or 6 servers, and then you have to pull down a bunch of different repos, and there's just no way to do that easily. And that's what the framework
you can do that in CI.
You can, but as a regular user, right? Like you're just not going to. The nice thing about having a portable DAO framework that maps onto trusted architectures like different databases, different storage techniques, things that Git would understand as far as doing run commands or that Terraform would understand, right? So the idea is you map these primitives to things that trusted enterprise deployment managers understand. Then it becomes very easy to take a whole DAO that everybody can see, that can be visualized, and give it integration tests via parameters that everybody understands. Because the DAO defines its own parameters at every interface. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about where the API keys are or where the wallet addresses are, anything like that. But I think it goes back to simulation.
It's kind of returning back to what we were mentioning before about, is this functional testing? Essentially, I know you're using graph technology to simulate. There's the simulation aspect of it, which is technically interesting in itself, but that's, again, we're talking about the solution there. So coming back upstream a little bit, we're talking about testing functionality in a very general sense, and the way to do that is through some form of workflow testing, to use the jargon, continuous integration. But so can we put that into a problem statement? Like, we're not able to do integration testing, essentially, because that's what integration test CI is. We're not able to, and put it even more explicit terms, we're not able to do end-to-end testing of a DAO.
That's good. We are not able to do end-to-end testing of the DAO, and the framework enables that in a very easy way.
Yeah, and that's a problem, and that's much more plain English. Do you know? I'm thinking about the general reader here and the
I
communication.
think Steven's giving. I think you're on. You give him this tagline, Steven. I think functional testing for DAOs is like your elevator pitch.
I used to be a test manager. So, but years ago, but yeah, I mean, I want to see more testing in Cardano as well in the Catalyst community, because I think it's needed, and I think it will happen because with projects like yours, Peter, and Vincent's, you're going to need these elements of integration to, anyway, I don't go off on that route, but what do you think, Vincent? Do you think that's helping on the problem statement?
It is. I think I think these edges that we've got are beautiful. The question is just which is the most approachable. So, do people understand? Because there's it's not just the people that can do end-to-end testing. There's a visual component for people that aren't coders. They need to be able to see the network, and they can actually visualize whether or not it's what they expect. They can see where they are, where all this logic is, and they can actually see the components. They can drill down, they can watch their data go through it. That goes back to the stakeholders thing, which is really nice, right? So that's this, the stakeholders cannot understand the functionality or behaviors of a DAO, or maybe by extension, stakeholders cannot trust a DAO that cannot be simulated.
There's an accessibility part to the problem that we may be overlooking, because we don't want just test managers looking at this. We want the general users to be able to understand that. Why can't they understand it? Because there's no accessible simulations of this, or no.
Oh, that's great. So DAOs.
So to push up the accessibility angle, because that's a problem. It's because you're not just targeting this at, well, forgive me if I'm wrong, you don't seem to be doing that. You don't seem to be saying technical users only, please. You seem to be saying, I'd like to build something that, a generalist could use. Is that right, Vincent? I'm not sure.
Not just a generalist, but a voter. Right, so the majority of the people that interact with DAOs are not technical at all. The artist community, the business community, what they're going to be voting on, when people choose a software product, the majority of them are not looking at under the hood, right? They're looking at they're looking at a feature list. They're looking at something pretty on screen. But for DAOs, that decision is much more extreme, because there's no changing it necessarily once it's up, right? There's a lot of trust involved, so it's for everybody, and that's the point of the graph visualization of the DAO, is that you can do artist iterations. Artists can look at it and say, this is a beautiful structure. They can actually just look at how things are connected and say, this is a beautiful piece of software because of the way these components are connected, because of the way data flows through and voters interact. It's beautiful. And they can go off and they can say it's beautiful. Business leaders can look for modules that make sense to them, almost like biological clumps. They can say, I'm not seeing a validator. I'm not seeing an emergency return of funds. I'm not seeing this other piece. There's a lot of clustering, I think, that hasn't happened in the space yet. We haven't got a family of DAOs and a family of module features that people understand yet, because no one's built them. But eventually there will be families of these really complex feature sets, right? State managers, archives, data protection, things like that, that people are going to be able to see without actually knowing the code, right? So that's something. It's like looking at a car and knowing it has 4 wheels, right? You can go around and you can make sure it has 4 wheels and an engine. You can do that visually without knowing how an engine works or how to machine a wheel. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, actually, Vincent. As you're talking, and you're really I like how you're really stressing the visualization point, and for lack of a better word, the common person, like I'm visualizing this like spinning globe and like edges like hitting nodes, and like as you're running the simulation, and then you can go focus in on one, and you can, okay, now we're in the second step and what's happening, and here's people's boats coming in, and just like I'm not a graphic designer, but like I can visualize something in my head that looks really fantastic, because like forget the part about like whether I trust the DAO or not. Let's assume I assume I trust the DAO for a second. Now it's like this overwhelming thing of like, how do I even know what the hell is going on? Because it's just so complex, right? Like there's so many people involved. Like how do, I think another really common problem with DAOs is just like keeping up with like proposals, right? Like how do I even know once it's like my inbox full, sorry, like, and shit, I missed an important one. But like, and again, maybe the visualization helps with that as well. But there's just this information overload, similar to what we talked about in the Catalyst Town Hall today, right? Like it's just like, and so I think what you're talking about is addressing a really huge problem that is going to be a huge need if all of this is going to work, if decentralization as a whole is going to work. So I just really encourage you to keep plugging away at that idea, because I think you're really onto something.
I really like where we've ended up though. DAO simulation and visualization is not accessible, because you're right, Stephen. Yes, you can do it with a workflow. You could spin up Jenkins and redo everything that Cardano is doing for Catalyst, but it would be a nightmare. Like it would take 10 people like 2 weeks probably to figure that out and get it running, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to spin up your commander and you have blockchain and.
I mean, what Peter was saying made me think of, I'll just say, decomposing a model. So you get this kind of like all this information thrown at you, and you have no way to break that up, and each functional path, for want of another word, has a meaning of its own, in terms of it has a behavior, and it has a function in terms of which is relevant to someone who might be interested, say, from a business perspective or whatever the DAO, or from a political perspective, whatever the DAO is trying to achieve, So that lack of decomposition, the kind of is a kind of makes it opaque. You can't break it up. It's misty. Just you can't really see. The word I'm trying to look at is granularity, I suppose. So you kind of like, yeah. I'm not really saying anything. I'm just thinking out loud. But,
yeah, but no, that's where I was getting when I first started with the word transparency. It's not that the code's not there. It's that you really, once the code base gets into the tens and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, there's just no way, especially when you start working with other services and you have API keys and you have access and permissions and all this other stuff that's floating around. There's just no way, you can't see it, right? Like it's there, but you can't see it in a way that's meaningful for any one person. There's just no meaningful way to see it. And that's that opacity that you're talking about. That's what, when I said it's not transparent, that's what I was saying. Yes, the code's there, but there's still, it's still not really transparent if you can't just be, it's like staring at a mountain from the foot of it, right? Like you just can't see it all. And that goes back to the simulation problem. Like you can't, and the visualization problem. Like you can't, there's no way, yeah, you're right. You can't break up pieces. You can't, like what Peter was saying, you can't go watch a piece because maybe you're only going to be interacting with a piece of the DAO where you get hired and fired and you get paid. And that's all you really care about. You just want to make sure that if you're signing on to an organization, that piece is of a certain caliber or is going to behave the way you want.
I suppose I was thinking, I know you can't see which piece is relevant to you as well. So let's say you have a DAO of an organization, you're not going to necessarily be interested in all of it, but just those pieces that will impact you. And that's where it becomes the simulation not only actually allows transparency, but it's a kind of an enabler actually as well. But maybe that's Tevo, have we kind of exhausted the problem, do you think? And should we move on to solutioning or?
Yeah, truly. I think we did get much deeper into the problem statement and got more value out of compared to what we had in start and probably in the middle. And one open question in here: does trust mean expected functionality or behavior? I don't like to leave loose ends. Can we answer that? Yes, no, both.
What does trust mean? Well, I think that could be a rhetorical question. So, well, not rhetorical, but I can just delete it if you like.
I think so, yeah. But I think we're in a really good place, especially if Peter's doing validated or is gonna give us better oracles and Steven's gonna give us better integration. Then I think if we can simulate a DAO, we can build a trusted system, a trusted pipe, a trusted workflow, all the way from architecture to code to deployment, which would be, that's the dream. that's the dream. I'm going to take this one though. I really like it, and thank you all for your input. That's a crazy amount of input, and thank you Tevo for masterfully going through Miro. I can't think of DAO simulation and visualization is not accessible. I like that. I think that says a lot. It says everything that I wanted to say.
How many characters is that?
And this, not much, very easy to read, understandable to a normal person. Like
it is 45 characters with no spaces, 51 with spaces.
Yeah, almost like a title.
What's sorry, this is the side question, but related to what we were just talking about. So what's the actual, does it say in Ideascale when you do the proposal what the character limitation is, so you know how much space you're taking up on the app interface? Because that's really what it boils down to, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're talking about now?
Problem statement's 140.
Yeah.
I changed it into an aspirand from an and, so I abbreviated the and. That's another trick you can do.
And so, it's like, 140 characters is going to work on all smartphones. Like, it doesn't matter like what the size of your screen. Like, it's not going to get cut off. Like I just want to make sure I can work my way backwards from as a proposer. And so in Ideascale, when it tells me this many characters, that it's referring to what people are going to see on the app. Is that right?
No, that's just the maximum you can even enter. If as soon as you go more, you cannot. It's a limit.
I think it's way short. If you look at the app on the phone, especially, I think they put a ... and they shrink it down, right? So it's not as accessible as all that.
Yeah. So sorry, maybe a separate question first.
If you're having a Catalyst application, you use all your characters, it will look nice. In Ideascale, it's gonna be chunky and unky, and I don't know how that works there. But there are gonna be more problems than that. As soon as community advisor role starts, you have no information about the problem unless they fix the problem. So don't worry about the Ideascale. But yeah.
But so where does the text, who does somebody cut and paste, or does how does the text actually end up in the voting app? Where is it coming from? What's the source?
In Ideascale, they will take out a CSV file, and probably they have API calls for the Jormankunder. The Catalyst application works on the Jormankunder network, which is the base layer of the Ouroboros or some, I don't know, like exact names and stuff. So there is a lot of manual work regarding the ballot stuff, but they do it in the last final stage when you cannot no longer edit your proposal.
Let me clarify with the problem statement. As a Catalyst proposer, I am not sure how many of my characters that I enter in the Ideascale will end up in the Catalyst voter app.
So in the application, you will only see title, problem statement, and solution, and relevant experience. The detailed plan will not go to application. In order for that to see, they will get the link to the Ideascale.
Okay, and who enters the text in the Catalyst voter app?
Catalyst team.
So they will summarize my text. They will cut and paste my text. Like, how do I have any control?
They pretty much copy and paste. Yes.
It's just a database call. So it's all in a database. like it's probably in the MySQL or Postgres database in the back end. And it's the same information. So you submit and it's just going to fill a field in a database. They're just going to pull it.
So there's an Ideascale submit that I use for the Ideascale app, and there's a separate form that I enter for the information I want to appear in the Catalyst voting app.
Wait,
No, it's
let me
you submit a
open.
proposal and then they pull from your proposal to build both the Ideascale web interface and on mobile and desktop. So you only submit once, and then you fill in some fields, and then they will pull that data and format it and do that. That's all, and then it shows up on the.
So basically, tomorrow, instead of this button, share insight, there will be submit proposal button here.
Right. Yeah.
And if you fill in these fields, 35 characters, it says, this text you put in will go to the application, to the voting application, but you will see the proposal when the actual stage comes, when they pull it there. Description you add, like in the, if there will be more fields in the proposal stage. So let's say go to the top. And yeah, pretty much the same fields you fill up here will go to the application. You don't have to do any more forms. And you can edit the text for 5 weeks.
Right, but I'm guessing there's no preview in the voting app. It's just there's gonna be a snapshot and then it's done. So I'm concerned about controlling the message, right? Because like, do you guys, am I asking the wrong question here? Like,
No,
does anyone else have the same concern?
you don't. You can't. I don't think you can preview on mobile.
Yeah, you cannot preview on mobile.
Because getting a proposal accepted, it's going to be most people aren't going to read Ideascale. Most of the voters are going to be reading it on their app, is my take. Like the people that are really heavily involved will be involved in Ideascale, but the majority of the voters are going to be reading it on their app. And so the most important thing, in my opinion, is that, and then if they're interested enough, then they'll follow the link to the more detailed stuff. Yeah. But if I don't get that language right on the app, my proposal's screwed, in my opinion. If I write a really great 1,000 word description, but it just gets cut off at like 400 words, then I'm screwed. So I got to make sure I write a really good 400 word description, right? So so I'm trying to figure out how that actually works.
Problem statement, describe your solution, and title. These are your most important information, what will be seen on the application. The second most important fact is that in the community advisor stage, people will read your proposal, so it has to be very understandable, and you have to hit all the key elements. Like, is it impactful? Does it have milestones? Does it have budget breakdowns? All the kinds of stuff they could nag you about. If you get through that process, then and successful in that stage means that you get 4 or more stars, and that means your proposal will be the first like 5 proposals the people see on the application, because the application itself sorts by the popularity, and even they have the option to change the stuff there. But my previous experience is that even if you filter out and then vote on one proposal and go back to the main stage where you select your proposals, it will reset all your filters. So it's really annoying. So nobody really does the filtering on application, and they simply start from the up. And if they don't have time, they won't get to you if you have less than 4 stars. And even if they do, they pretty much read the problem statement, describe the solution, and if they, as soon as they like see something off, they will skip you.
Yeah, I mean, to directly address what Peter's saying, I think it's a fair point. If you go to the slides of this week's town hall and go to slide 32, there's an image of the app as it would look on a mobile phone. I'm not sure, but again, it'd be an interesting thing for, say, Danny or Catalyst support to answer, like what will be a typical presentation, as you're saying, Peter, in terms of characters on the phone, because that is important in terms of how you may consider the first couple of sentences for your problem statement, your solution statement, I imagine, isn't it? Yeah, problem and solution are going to be critical there. As Tevo says, the other main criterion of whether a voter will vote for you will be your score as well. Does that help, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. And that slide is in fact why I'm asking. And I was involved in, like, I did vote in Fund 3, and then I've just returned back to community for this round. And I wasn't sure if things had changed, but yeah, exactly that screen cap of the app is what. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. So.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure if I'm looking at on my iPhone XE, like, that's one thing, but if my daughter's looking on her SE, does that mean the screen's smaller and now she's seeing less text, or is it just like, is it minimized? You know, does it just aspect ratio it down? Like, these are all, in my opinion, this is the elevator pitch, right? Like, if I don't get the elevator pitch right, then there's only so many. Like, first of all, thank you to you. That's useful to know. Like, you got to do well in the initial Ideascale stages to even get ranked high, so that you're ideally showing up you're ranked and you're prioritized when people are looking at proposals. But then when they do see it, just exactly this that we're looking at here, like, that's probably the 400 characters we're talking about, right, in the problem statement. And so
I think the straight answer is that we don't know, because
cool. That's an answer. Thanks.
It's possible. No, what I mean is, it's not going to. We don't know how it's going to look on different phones, for example, in terms of that. I'm not sure if you see more characters on a phone with a bigger screen, for example. But it gives you a general guide of, as you're saying, your elevator pitch. What should you concentrate in the first few sentences or characters of your problem statement and your solution? Absolutely.
Also, I don't know about the screen, but like, I think that's the least of your issue. I mean, right now the solution, problem statement, like and relevant experience is the main thing, and title, of course, is what they see first, and one key factor is the rating. So that's why, like some people may say that, like, spending entire hour and even in like a group just to get one word out is like a waste of time, but it really impacts a lot. I have done proposals several times, but the mini proposal process was in Fund 5 first time, and that was the first time I actually got funded. So I give credit to that process, because I did it like meticulously, or like using words I don't even know the meaning. but yeah.
Is that something that somebody can get an answer for proposers? Because I still feel like I'm left hanging a little bit. Like, sorry if I'm harping on this, and I'll stop. But
no, I agree. I think you should. I think you should follow through. I'm just thinking, if you send, I mean, we could ask Danny Tevo. I'm not sure how you respond to that.
Yeah, I can just write to him like right now.
Just write to him, and because he might know straight away. No, I think it's perfectly valid, Peter.
That would be like a great feature, being able to preview your proposal before you finally submit it. So being able to just have it in preview mode, and then when you log in, only you can see it.
Yeah, I don't think that might work. Just because I have had talks with the team about using the Catalyst application for different sources, and that's not easy at all. There are so many steps to do before they can even put anything on the application. So I think that's just too much overhead for them to create a preview. Until the Voltaire, it's like, it's not automated. It's so much manual work. And
I think the reality is there's only about 3 or 4 people who are understaffed doing this at the back end, and I think they're manually exporting. They're manually exporting from a spreadsheet. You know.
Yeah. I'm not demanding a new feature. I'm just trying to get transparency so I can understand how to.
No. I know it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's
So believe me, I'm an open source developer myself, and so I know how this works. Like, and so, but I'm just trying to understand. It just helps if I know what's going on. And all I need is somebody to say, yeah, we restrict the Ideascale to 400 characters because that's where we cut it off anyway. Or you could be writing 600 characters in Ideascale, but when it goes to the app, you get cut off at 400 characters. And I'm only going to write 400 characters. Right? That's the simple answer I'm trying to get. Like, and I don't need
the character is you can use all the characters you can, and they will all be shown on the Catalyst application. But the Ideascale already limits you that at the maximum level, so you cannot go overboard. And detailed plan, okay. And the detailed plan that you won't see on a Catalyst application.
Okay, so I misunderstood, Tevo. I see. Thanks for clarifying. I thought that actually cut you off. I thought it actually like sliced the words. So you're saying, yeah, okay, now I get it. Okay, so thanks.
My bad.
No, it's my bad too. I wasn't asking the right question. So thank you.
No, I really appreciate your question because it's something that frustrated me as a proposer in Fund 5, was I didn't really know that. I mean, I still got funded, but I didn't, if I'd known that, I might have written my proposal differently, in terms of how it's presented onto the voters on a mobile phone. So it's a really critical point, really. And hopefully once, smart contracts are in and they've got all that out of the way, they can start to automate the whole process so we can have previews and everything like that.
That'd be cool. Yeah. I'm not against new features, of course, but like I totally have sympathy for the Catalyst team. I've been working on underfunded open source projects all my life, so all my professional life.
Oh yeah.
Right. I'm gonna stop.
Fun, guys. I really appreciate this workshop. Hope to see you guys around through more of this process. Cheers.
Nice meeting you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Definitely stay connected with your Oracle work because
I will.